Alright, we've reached the end of January. Before we begin, I actually just want to say, sadly this month we lost one of the absolute greats. Mr. David Lynch sadly passed away. And he's just one of the absolute greatest filmmakers. I mean, one of my personal favorites, but just objectively one of the best. You know, one of the only guys, he was like on par with Kubrick and Fellini in terms of like a true visionary who their films are unmistakably theirs. And he could create a movie that felt like experiencing a dream while you're awake. You watch Eraserhead, or you watch Blue Velvet, or Mulholland Drive. And it doesn't make sense. He didn't want it to make sense. He didn't want you to be able to make sense of them. He just wanted you to experience them and feel something. And it's like living a dream, or a nightmare in most cases. But he was just, the world of movies has suffered a tragic loss, and I don't normally do like obituaries in these, but this month felt like it should be an exception, because David Lynch is David Lynch, But anyway, on that morbid note, let's get into it. Madagascar. I was around at my parents' house, and my sister was browsing through Netflix trying to find a movie to watch. For some reason we landed on Madagascar, I'm not quite sure why. But I used to love Madagascar when I was a kid. I was like the perfect age. We were like 7 and 4 or something when it came out, so we were like the right age to enjoy Madagascar. And I probably watched it 100 times then and played the tie-in video game. But I haven't seen it in probably 15 years, if not more. And it was interesting to watch it again now. And it's still really funny. It's still a great story and a fun adventure. But like, I remembered it feeling a lot longer. And now watching it, it flew by. Like, it gets from... Me and my sister were both saying, like, when Alex goes feral and runs off into the woods, we felt like that was a much longer stretch of the film. But that's like over and done with in 10 minutes, if that. And I think it's just because when you're a kid, your conception of time is different, You get older, you've experienced more time, so time goes faster and faster. Not to get all existential, but, every year feels faster than the last because it's another year you've lived. Your lifetime is it's a smaller percentage of your entire lifetime. It was trippy to realize that watching Madagascar. Nutcrackers, another Ben Stiller joint. And this was more recent. I was really looking forward to it because I love Ben Stiller. I love David Gordon Green. I haven't loved his last couple of horror movies, but I love his comedies. I love Pineapple Express, and even like The Sitter and Your Highness aren't great films, but they're funny. And Ben Stiller, I love Ben Stiller. He hasn't starred in a movie in a long time because he's been directing Succession, Severance, I mean, and Escape from Damora. So this was like his big comeback to a leading role in a movie, and I was really excited for it, and then it got pretty mixed to negative reviews, so I was like, and kind of just forgot about it. But one day I'm browsing Disney Plus, I think it was, and it's there, and I stuck it on, and I really enjoyed it. I actually thought it was wonderful. It's, it's a very familiar, very formulaic story, where he's this childless workaholic guy who, has no interest in having kids and being part of a family, and then his sister dies and he's the next of kin, so he has to come and look after his orphaned nephews. And he's this big city executive corporate guy, and he has to come to this like small rural town and live on this farm with these kids. And he's trying to find them, parents to adopt them so he can get back to his life, his corporate life. And gradually he becomes endeared to the kids, and he loves the kids, and he wants to raise them. And it's, a story you've seen a bunch of times. But as long as it works, as long as the chemistry is there between the lead actor and the kids, and you believe that their bond forms, I don't really care that I've seen it before. I'll watch that a million times. And I thought this was a really wonderful example of it. Ben Stiller's great in it, as always. He's hilarious, but he's also like a great actor. And he's not afraid to play unlikable. Like, he really commits to not giving a fuck about these kids. Even, like, the audience becomes endeared to the kids a lot faster than he does, because they're great kids. I think they're all real brothers in real life. So, obviously, all their bonds are very real, and as he gradually warms up to them, it's just really sweet to see. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And it's really funny, and, like, I didn't get the hate. I didn't get the negative reviews. Its heart is completely in the right place. It's a wonderful film. Alice Darling. This is a really interesting little kind of psychological drama with Anna Kendrick is in this toxic kind of abusive relationship with this guy, and but she doesn't let on to her friends that he's so toxic and abusive. She kind of like wants to normalize it in her head and think it's okay, he loves me, and she goes away with her friends, and she's had to like lie to him about where she's going because he wouldn't even let her go away with her friends. And her friends kind of slowly start to figure out like, oh, you're terrified of your boyfriend and that's not right, and we need to get you out of this. And it all felt so real. I mean, obviously that's a real thing that happens a lot, but usually it's the way it's portrayed in movies is really, there's cliches and tropes, and they don't necessarily reflect the reality of it. But the reality is much more haunting because it's real. And this just felt like I don't have any first-hand experience of this kind of thing. None of my friends or anything have ever, thankfully, been a part of this kind of thing, that I've had to be like Anna Kendrick's friends in this film and try and help them. But it just felt real, it felt authentic. And Anna Kendrick was fantastic in it. She's been very open in interviews and things, talking about how she was in a very toxic relationship that she had to get out of. And I felt like she was drawing on those experiences to play this really real. And it was just, and it's, it's hard to watch. It's not like an entertaining ride. It's very disturbing, but very, very powerful. Don't think twice. This movie I absolutely loved. It's Mike Birbiglia wrote it and directed it and stars in it as the leader of this improv group. And it was an incredible cast. It's like Keegan-Michael Key and Gillian Jacobs and Chris Gethard and just some really funny people. And one of them, Keegan-Michael Key, gets invited to audition for essentially SNL, but it's not SNL, it's Weekend Live. I guess Birbiglia couldn't get the rights to use SNL, or maybe because it kind of shows SNL to be a pretty toxic work environment, maybe they didn't want to. But it's Weekend Live, it's so clearly SNL. Like even when you see the opening credits of all the cast members like coming out of the subway or getting a taxi, and it's like exactly the same as the opening credits of SNL. But anyway, so he auditions for Weekend Live and he gets it, and it completely changes the dynamic, because now overnight he becomes this famous comedy star, and all his friends are still doing improv to 30 people, and they all immediately want him to submit their writing packets and get them auditions, and they do a really bad job of hiding the fact that they really resent him for his success. And that must be what it's really like, because you come up as a group, but you're not all going to make it. And then when one of you makes it, the rest will be like, why did he make it and I didn't make it? It's just great in the very Mike Birbiglia way, where if you've seen any of his stand-up, or it's not even really stand-up, it's like one-man shows. It feels reductive to call what he does stand-up, because it's standing on a stage and saying funny things, but he's telling stories, and the whole thing's unified usually by a theme. But it's always really funny, but also hits on a deeper level and is very profound and digs into the human condition. And that's what this movie was. I don't want to oversell it as if it's being there, but it's it's a really funny comedy with a great ensemble, but there's deeper emotions as well. I really, really enjoyed it. The characters felt like real people, and the acting was incredible, and they all had great chemistry, and I really enjoyed it. Total Recall. I don't know why I felt compelled to rewatch Total Recall. It's just a great film. I have a Mars Today t-shirt. I have a t-shirt with the logo of the Martian newspaper Mars Today from Total Recall, one of my most prized possessions. And it's just a great film. It's what if it's sold as a typical Arnold Schwarzenegger action fest, and it has a ton of great action scenes in it, but it's more than that. It's what if Arnold Schwarzenegger starred in an episode of Black Mirror. It's Philip K. Dick wrote the original story. It's he's a construction worker in the future. He can't afford to go on a nice holiday, but there's this company that implants memories of holidays, so it feels like you went. And he gets there, and they're like, it doesn't have to be a holiday. We can implant memories of you being a secret agent on a mission on Mars. And he has that done, and halfway through the procedure he comes to, and he's like, I have to get back to Mars and complete my mission. And then all these shady government men in black are coming after him, he knows too much, and his wife is trying to kill him. And it's wait, was he a secret agent on Mars? And he has to go to Mars and try and get to the bottom of the conspiracy. And it's so much fun, and so many twists, and it's just wildly entertaining. Star Wars Skeleton Crew. This finished this month, and I really, really hope there's a season 2. The viewership hasn't been great, so maybe there won't be a season 2, but this was just an absolutely delightful show. I loved all the characters, I loved those kids, and I want to see them again. I want to see them go on more adventures in a galaxy far, far away. And, I did a video about it. Check that out if you haven't. But yeah, this was an absolutely delightful show. If you're a Star Wars fan and you haven't checked it out, what are you doing? Get on it. Cowboy Bebop. I still haven't finished this. I started watching it last month. There's literally only 26 half-hour episodes of the entire show. I still haven't finished it. I've still got about 6 left, but I'm deliberately rationing them out. I'm deliberately not watching them. I don't want to just binge it and be done with it, because when those 26 are over, that's it. And I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm really loving the characters. It's this crazy genre mix of Western and science fiction and film noir. and social commentary, and when it's over, that's it. I don't want to. I'm pacing myself so I don't run out too fast. I'm like Elaine with the sponges. And speaking of Elaine and the sponges, Seinfeld. Been watching Seinfeld, or rewatching it. I started last month. This month I finished, and you can really tell it's like night and day the difference between right before Larry David left the show and right after, when Jerry Seinfeld became the sole showrunner. And because it suddenly becomes way more zany and out there and cartoonish, where like Larry had always kept it relatively grounded in real mundane situations. And then in season 8, season 9, it just goes way off the deep end with these crazy stories. Jerry becomes a werewolf. Kramer tans with butter as his tanning oil and cooks himself, and Newman wants to eat him. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy, but still really funny. That's the thing. It's not like The Office where it gets shitty in the last couple of seasons and it's not funny anymore. Seinfeld goes crazy, but it's still really funny right up to the end. And actually quite like the finale. I don't know why people hate it so much. I mean, I'm thinking of doing a video about these controversial finales, Seinfeld and Lost and How I Met Your Mother and The Sopranos. Because a lot of them, you watch them and they're actually not that bad. I mean, How I Met Your Mother, they really did drop the ball. But Seinfeld is like, people wanted to see a finale like Jerry and Elaine get married or something. But that's the kind of finale you get with a feel-good show like Parks and Rec or something like that. But Seinfeld was different. Seinfeld was, about terrible people doing terrible things and suffering the consequences, and this was the ultimate consequence. Lockerbie, A Search for Truth. I wouldn't have watched this of my own volition, but I had to watch it for work. I had to write a couple of articles about it for work. I got in a tiny bit of trouble with the NBC Universal PR team. But that was all cleared up. I'd never even heard of the Lockerbie bombing. It's the deadliest terrorist attack in British history, and I'm British. I should have heard of it. But I'm an ignorant moron. I'd never heard of it. And it's been like 30 years, and they still haven't got to the bottom of who did it. They still haven't found a definitive answer to, like, who did this, why did they do it, what was the, And this guy, Jim Swire, has committed that entire time to figuring out the truth. Because his daughter, who was like 23 or something at the time, was on the flight that was bombed, and it was supposed to explode over the ocean, and all traceable evidence would be lost at the bottom of the sea, but the plane took off late, and so it exploded over the town of Lockerbie, and bodies and parts of the plane were just falling down, and more people died under the plane, as well as everyone on board. It's just a devastating fucking attack. But it took forever, even though there was separate investigations in the UK and the US launched by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. They never yielded any real results, I mean, there was a conviction, but this Jim Swire guy was convinced he didn't do it, and it was a government cover-up, and he was desperate to find the truth. But obviously, you rely on the governments to make the investigations happen and get the truth out, but if they're covering shit up, that's not going to happen. So anyway, in the TV show, Colin Firth plays Jim Swire, and it's about his quest for truth. And I thought it was great. I've since seen, the critics weren't that kind to it, and people who were affected by the Lockerbie bombing have called it tragedy porn, which is an interesting buzzword that's popped up in recent years, or trauma porn, But I thought it was great. I got kind of swept up in his investigation, and every time it seemed like they were narrowing in on an answer, some other piece of evidence would come in, or something would come in to cast doubt on it, and every time they would rule something out, it's like, great, so that's not it, but we still don't know what happened. And Colin Firth was fantastic. That was a great performance by him, as always. I mean, when does he ever phone it in? But yeah, I thought it was a good show, and like I said, if I hadn't had to watch it for work, I never would have watched it. Citizen Kane. I hadn't seen Citizen Kane in a long time, but I wanted to do a dummies guide. Because I've been doing some of the last dummies guides were about really complicated, complex movies, Mulholland Drive and The Matrix, and it's like trying to unravel the plot and figure out what the hell's going on, the mysteries. So I wanted to do one about a movie that is very complex, but is understandable. It's not, confounding like Mulholland Drive. And I quite enjoyed watching Citizen Kane again. It was interesting, how relevant it all felt. Like, the rich and powerful can do whatever the hell they want with no consequences, no accountability, use the media outlets they own to just say whatever they want and make whatever they want to be true, become true. And, this is like 80 years later, and that's still exactly what's happening in the world. It's depressing, but interesting to see that that's always been going on. The end of the tour. I absolutely loved this. I don't think I've read a single piece of writing by David Foster Wallace. I want to get into David Foster Wallace. And I own Infinite Jest, and I own the one he did about the cruise. Something, what is it? a totally fun thing I'll never do again or something like that. So they're sitting there on my bookshelf. I never picked them up. I mean, Infinite Jest is like 1,000 pages long. I don't know if I'll ever get around to that one, but the cruise one I could read. I've been on a cruise. I could relate to that. But anyway, in this movie, Jason Segel plays David Foster Wallace, who's on the last leg of his book tour for Infinite Jest, and Jesse Eisenberg plays this journalist from Rolling Stone who's doing like a profile on him and joins him on his last couple of stops on the tour. And it kind of just becomes this bromance between these two guys who most of the time they're getting along and they're getting to know each other and they're having a good time together, and then occasionally Jesse Eisenberg will ask a question that's a bit too probing or a bit leading, and David Foster Wallace will take it the wrong way, or he'll, see the journalistic tactics behind it, and they'll get into a bit of an argument. And it was just a really, really interesting two-hander. They were great. Jason Segel and Jesse Eisenberg were fantastic in it, and I just got really into this relationship between these two guys. And I'm not to toot my own horn, or not to compare myself to a legend like David Foster Wallace, but I'm a professional writer, so I could kind of relate to these two guys. I'm not saying I'm as good, but I'm in the same world technically. I thought it was a fantastic film because at the beginning it starts off with Jesse Eisenberg getting the news that David Foster Wallace has taken his own life, and then you go back and see their whole relationship and how that evolved and what David Foster Wallace meant to him. And then when you get back to his death, now you know him. Like, I cried at the end of this film because I had gotten to know him and gotten to care about him, and I was heartbroken that he killed himself. It's a really, really great film, great performances, and just I thought it was great. Knock at the Cabin, the Shyamalan movie from I think last year or 2 years ago. This wasn't great. This was pretty shite, to be honest with you. And it had great actors in it. Jonathan Groff is in it, and Dave Bautista. The premise is insane. This family, this couple and their daughter are staying at this cabin, and Dave Bautista and these guys show up with weapons and say, you need to pick one of the three of you to be killed or the world will end. And every time they don't make the decision, Dave Bautista has to kill one of his guys, and then they turn on the news and there's a tsunami, or there's plane crashes all over the world, and it's like different signs of the end times. And it's kind of an interesting premise, I suppose, but as with most of Shyamalan's movies, once they start explaining why, it falls apart, like The Happening. I loved the beginning of The Happening. I was so unsettled by like this mysterious force that's making people kill themselves en masse. And then you find out it's the trees. Trees are making them do it because as revenge for climate change and for deforestation and things. And it's like, I get the message, treat the environment nicely or the environment will retaliate, but that's so stupid. This was the same sort of thing, which is, spoiler alert, but it's not worth protecting yourself from the spoiler. It's not even worth watching. It's like, it's this family in particular because their love for each other is so pure that they have to pick someone to die because that, like, it doesn't hold water at all. They love each other so much that they have to pick one to die, and then the world won't end. It was so stupid. It was, there's some thrilling sequences in it, I made it to the end. I didn't, hate it, but it wasn't very good. I wouldn't recommend it. Tar. This was a big Oscar heavy hitter a couple of years ago, and it basically is like Me Too, but it's a woman, Cate Blanchett is this conductor who has this long history of emotional abuse and sexual abuse, and she's given prominent positions in her orchestra to the musicians who would do sexual favors for her, and blacklisted the ones who wouldn't. And so she basically is like Harvey Weinstein of the classical music world, but she's a woman. But it's a really interesting film. It's her performance is absolutely fantastic. I mean, as always, but this one in particular stands out as one of her best, because it's there are scenes where she's giving a lecture and the camera just stays on her and follows her around the room for 15 minutes, and she's doing all this very complicated, very technical dialogue the entire time and interacting with her students, and it all feels very spontaneous, but it's obviously very heavily scripted and choreographed. But she makes it feel like you're watching someone just filmed their lecturer on their phone, And she's great at being unsettling. She'll sit next to this kid who's really nervous and he's twitching his leg, which is what I do when I'm nervous. I mean, it's what everyone does when they're nervous. And she's his leg's going crazy because she's being really intimidating and scaring him. And then at a certain point she grabs his leg, stop shaking your leg. And it's dude, you're making him shake his leg by scaring the hell out of him. But yeah, it's a long fucking movie. I think it's 2 hours and 40 minutes or something. But she gives just such a mesmerizing performance. And It's just this very interesting kind of psychological character study where as her past misdeeds are coming back to haunt her, and like she's telling her assistant, you know, bury these emails from this woman who I abused and then she killed herself, but instead she holds on to the emails and joins the case against her, and you know the walls are closing in, and she starts to have these weird psychological side effects of this shit coming back to haunt her, where she's like running through the woods and she hears a woman screaming. She can't find who's screaming. It's just something, it's like in her head. And she can't sleep at night. She's hearing like a really loud metronome. You know, it's very cinematic. Hearts beat loud. I absolutely adored this film. This was beautiful. It's Nick Offerman plays like a guy who owns a record shop. He used to be in a band and he used to make music, but he never really made it, and his record shop's about to be foreclosed because he's not selling enough records and he can't make the rent. And his daughter, played by Kiersey Clemons, also brilliant, she's about to go off to college. And he and his daughter just like for fun record a song, and then he puts it on Spotify to see if anything would come of it. And then one day he's in a coffee shop and their song is playing, and it's like on the hot new indie songs mix on Spotify. And so his daughter's just about to leave for college and she doesn't want to be in a band with him, but their band is kind of taking off. But it's just really wonderful, you know. It's this really touching father-daughter story. And Nick Offerman's best friend is played by Ted Danson, and his landlady, who he has a bit of a romance with, is played by Toni Collette. It was just a really terrific cast, and he has that same thing that he has as Ron Swanson, where it's like he's very grumpy and cynical and deadpan, but also has a huge heart, you know, and is very sweet deep down. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, if you want to like a feel-good movie, Hearts Beat Loud, that's it. That's the one. Check it out. Emilia Pérez. When this was announced like a few months ago, and it was getting a lot of festival buzz, I was really excited about it because it's such an interesting idea that it's this like Mexican cartel thriller / a musical, you know? Such an interesting mix of genres. And an interesting story that like the cartel boss wants to transition, and so she fakes her death, sends her wife and kids away, and starts this new life as Emilia Pérez. But then she wants to see her kids again, so she has the wife and kids brought back and like pretends to be their dad's long lost cousin or something, you know? It was a very interesting story. And but then it actually made it to Netflix and people watched it, not just festival people but regular people. It started getting a lot of hate and a lot of controversy because, and this is all stuff I wouldn't know about. Like trans people are saying it's not good trans representation, and I wouldn't know what good trans representation looks like really. Spanish speakers are saying that the Spanish is horrible, the accents are horrible, and the script is like it went through Google Translate, like from French to English then to Spanish, so it's not good Spanish. And that like Selena Gomez's accent is like as cartoonishly bad as Brad Pitt doing the Italian accent in Inglourious Basterds, like buongiorno. Like apparently it's that bad, but I don't speak Spanish. They kind of highlight it for me. You can't really a performance that's in a language you don't speak. You can't really tell how good it is. Because I was watching that movie, I thought Selena Gomez was great. I thought everyone was great. So there's all this controversy about how it's a terrible movie, and it's also getting like record number Oscar nominations, and it's winning Golden Globes. And so I don't know. I finally checked it out for myself to form my own opinion, and I don't know, this might be a hot take, this might be controversial, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very fun movie. It was, I thought the music was very catchy. The performances were great, especially Zoe Saldana. I thought she was great as Emilia's lawyer. I don't know, I had a good time with it. And people point to like the one lyric from the Vaginoplasty song, Penis to Vagina. Like, you can't just pluck one line out and use that as evidence that a whole movie sucks. Like, yeah, it's kind of weird to do a whole song about what a vaginoplasty is. Maybe they could have cut that. But the whole film plays with a very deliberately campy tone and very deliberately over the top. So that in the context of the tone of the film, that's actually not that crazy or jarring of a line to put in the song. Visually, it's very stunning. It's very beautifully shot. The colors are just, and the lighting is like very, very cinematic. I don't know what to say. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if it's like record-breaking number of Oscar nominations good, but it's not bad. It's not a terrible film. But again, you know, I don't know, I don't have the trans perspective, and I don't speak Spanish. So take my opinion with like a massive handful of salt, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I don't know, from a cis white English speaker's perspective, it was, I thought it was a good movie. I really enjoyed it. Nosferatu. Went out with my dad and my sister. We watched Nosferatu on the big screen, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought maybe it was my favorite film Robert Eggers has done yet, which is saying a lot, because I really enjoyed The Northman and The Witch and The Lighthouse were both great. But I guess I was expecting a very dull, dreary affair, which I would have been okay with, a very somber kind of. But it's a lot of fun. I was not anticipating how much fun it would be. Bill Skarsgård's performance as Count Orlok is really fun. He has this really, really thick, cartoonish Eastern European accent, and he has this big Dr. Eggman mustache, but it works. Like, he actually is creepy because he's a great actor and he has that intimidating, sinister presence. Lily Rose Depp was incredible. It reminded me of the, it was not a surprise to me that she has named Possession as an influence, because, like, she really captured that, like, out-of-body physicality really, really well. Where it's like, when she's possessed and a demonic force is dragging her around the room, like, you buy it. It's very unnerving to watch. And, the emotions is a very, very fraught emotional performance, and it really demanded a lot of her, and, she nailed it. It can't have been easy to do those scenes. Like, some of those scenes must have been really emotionally draining. You have to do them 10 times in a row with different takes, and Robert Eggers strikes me as, like, a perfectionist. Maybe she had to do 25 takes of, like, convulsing and her eyes roll back, and she was amazing. She's, I already thought she was, like, a great actor. She was great in The Idol, even though The Idol was one of the worst fucking things I've ever seen. She was great in it, and I feel like she never phones it in. And this was, like, the best performance of hers I've seen yet. She was incredible in it. And Nicholas Hoult, I love Nicholas Hoult as, like, the everyman. Like, he's funny in it because he's just reacting when he meets Count Orlok, or his wife is, like, possessed and, like, pinning him to the bed, and, like, but it's not her. It's like something's taken over her body, and he just, like, reacts to those situations as a normal person would. He's just like a lawyer or like an estate agent, who just wants to live a normal life, and this vampire has invaded his life and his marriage. And Nicholas Hoult was great as that, at the comedic straight man. Because that I didn't anticipate was how funny it would be. There's like gags in this film. There's like, Nicholas Hoult comes out in the gypsy village. And he's like, "Where's my horse?" Cut to, he's walking up the mountain because someone stole his horse, and that's a big laugh. There's a lot of big laughs in the film, and it was visually very stunning. That's sort of par for the course for Robert Eggers now, but there was like visuals where like Count Orlok is a shadow, and like you see him, brush past a curtain, but he's not actually there. It's just his shadow pushing the curtain fast, or like a shadow of his hand sort of leers over the entire town. It was visually stunning, and when it was over, the guy in front of me turned around to his girlfriend and was like, "Well, that was shit." But it's like, come on. Even if you didn't like it, you can't just dismiss it as a piece of shit. The cinematography alone was so spectacular and so unique, and just, you can't say that was shit. That is a very ignorant comment. But yeah, I really enjoyed Nosferatu. It's hard to recommend to people, because if they don't like it, you don't have to think you're a total weirdo. But I thought it was this great examination of desire, and how desire can be a weakness. Because ultimately, that's what Lily Rose Depp does. She uses Count Orlok's desire to suck her blood against him. Like, all she has to do is keep begging him to stay on her and keep sucking her dry until the sun comes up. And he can't pull himself away because he wants that blood. It was just this cool thematic thing of, like, desire can be your greatest strength because it can, like, motivate you to do stuff, but it can also be your weakness. It can be your greatest weakness. I thought it was really great. Champions. This came on Netflix. I think it came out last year or the year before. Woody Harrelson is like a disgraced basketball coach who's his like community service is to coach this team of kids with Down syndrome, and it's another like typical like Nutcrackers. It's like a very familiar formula. It's like Bad News Bears kind of formula where, this miserable coach, he wants to get back to the NBA, but he's been forced to work with this like lower league, and initially he doesn't care about these kids. He doesn't care if they win or lose games, and he doesn't want to get to know them, and he just wants to do his hours and get back to his job. But eventually he warms up to the kids, and he becomes endeared to the kids, and he loves them, and he wants them to succeed, he wants them to win. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny and really sweet, and just and like the Farrelly brothers get a lot of flack for their kind of crass humor, but they're like two of the only filmmakers in Hollywood who actually cast disabled people in their movies and treat them like everyone else. No one's doing that. They either cast able-bodied actors to play disabled people, or they'll cast like a blind guy as a blind guy, then be like, "Look at us, we got a blind guy and he can't see." But with the Farrelly brothers, in Louder Milk or in other things, in Champions, they will have disabled actors and they're just another member of the cast. And I don't think they get enough credit for that, because that's no one else really is doing that. I can't think of another director who does that. A real pain. It's another one we went down to the cinema for, and I absolutely loved it. This is another, like, this is the month that, like, I've always liked Jesse Eisenberg, but this month I really, really have come to love him so much, because I loved him in End of the Tour, and I loved this movie that he wrote and directed and stars in. And it's so fucking funny. It's so, like, literally, like me and my dad and my sister were sitting on the front row. It might just been because we were on the front row, we couldn't hear all the people, but I feel like we were the only ones laughing. Like, I think this would have been a great movie for a crowd if the crowd had a sense of humor, but I felt like no one else was laughing. A couple of people even left halfway through and never came back. I don't know why, though. It's such a great film. And, like, we were laughing hysterically through the whole thing. The odd couple relationship of Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin is fantastic, and, you know, they're so perfectly matched, and, like, you watch interviews with them promoting it, and it's like the interviews could be a deleted scene from the film. They have the exact same relationship off screen that they have on screen, where Jesse Eisenberg's very nervous and anxious and insecure and in his own head, and Kieran Culkin is just very laid back and outgoing and says whatever's on his mind, and then, you know, they kind of bring out these other sides of each other. And it's while they're on this Holocaust tour, and that was a really strong directorial choice, that when they actually visit a concentration camp, that sequence is very low-key. There's a lot of comedy the rest of the film in every other scene, undercutting the drama in a really fun way. But when they're in a concentration camp, that all goes away. It's very, very low-key, it's very understated, it's very, you know, let these horrific images speak for themselves kind of thing. And it just works beautifully. So Kieran Culkin's a shoo-in for Best Supporting Actor. I can't wait to see him win. And I'd love to see Jesse Eisenberg win Best Original Screenplay too, because it's such a beautifully written film where there's no frills. It's just these two characters and their relationship is front and center the whole time. And I absolutely loved it. I mean, the year has only just begun, but I could see that landed on my top 10 at the end of the year. Breaking Bad. Been rewatching Breaking Bad for I think the third or fourth time now. I binge watched it all when it ended, I think in 2013, and then shortly after that my dad watched it, and I kind of like watched it again as he was watching it, and then I think in like the COVID lockdown I watched it all again, and now I'm doing it again. So it's going to be like every 5 or 6 years, I guess. It's such an incredible show. It's not an overstatement when people say it was the greatest show of all time, and it was like the defining show of peak TV, when it was like the golden age of television. It was like every other show, even like Mad Men, was like playing for second to Breaking Bad. 'Cause Breaking Bad is just like everything you want from a TV show, because it's like really, really deep, compelling drama with three-dimensional characters who act like real people and make decisions like real people and constantly surprise you but never act out of character. And it's very, very funny. It's very darkly funny. It's like as funny like The Sopranos was, where it's like as funny as any sitcom. It's as funny as any straightforward comedy, but it's technically a drama. And it's very action-packed and very thrilling and very tense. And the double life thing is always very interesting to watch, where it's like Walt has to keep up appearances as the mild-mannered husband and father and high school chemistry teacher, and he's becoming this drug lord in the underground criminal world, and never the twain shall meet. Obviously the twain eventually meet, and his lives come crashing together, and he has to figure it all out. And it's just an endlessly fascinating show, you know? Incredible writing and acting, and like Bryan Cranston as Walter White. I remember when it ended, Anthony Hopkins sent him a letter and said, "This is the greatest acting I've ever seen." And it's hard to disagree with him, because he completely embodies that role. There's so many different layers to the character, and he perfectly captures every single layer of it. Like when he's just being a dorky dad, like Hal in Malcolm in the Middle, you completely get it. It's completely authentic. But then when he's like standing up to a drug dealer and saying, "I'm gonna kill you," you believe that too. That's just as authentic. And I don't think any other actor could have handled that as well. They might have been able to get one side or the other, but the other side would suffer. They wouldn't, you know. Maybe like Robert De Niro in his prime could have done that. But it's a special kind of actor that can pull that off. So yeah, I'm on season 4, just started season 4. So I'm almost at the end now. Season 5 was the last one. And then I'm going to roll into Better Call Saul and rewatch all of that, because that's just as great. And it all ties together. But yeah, it's if you've only seen Breaking Bad once, I highly recommend watching it another time, because it's you pick up on things you missed the first time, and you can appreciate it more when you know where it's going. But yeah, truly, truly great television. Broad City. Won't say too much about this because this comes up on every other one of these videos, because I watch it all the time. But it's just a really easy, breezy watch. There's 50 episodes, I think, 5 seasons, 10 episodes each, and it's just endlessly watchable because there's always something crazy going on in New York, and Abby and Alana are such great characters to watch. But I'm finding, you know, as I watch it every few months, it gets really, really sad towards the end, which, if you've not seen it, won't spoil what happens at the end, but it's heartbreaking in the last 2 or 3 episodes. But that doesn't stop me from going back to the beginning and starting all over again every couple of months. Wolfman. This is another one I wasn't really planning to watch, but I had to write about it for work, so I went to watch it, and I thought it was pretty naff, to be honest with you. It was a huge letdown. I loved Lee Whannell's Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. That was a fantastic movie, and it blended the horror story of the Invisible Man with the theme of domestic abuse and toxic relationships really, really well, because they blended together seamlessly. That like she escapes from the relationship, he's out of her life, but she still has this feeling, because the trauma doesn't go away, the PTSD doesn't go away. She has this feeling, this niggling feeling that he's like watching over her shoulder the whole time, that he's like, you know, she's escaped him, but he's right behind her. And when you have him there in this suit that makes him invisible, stalking her, it's like the perfect horror metaphor for that feeling, for that trauma. And it was brilliant. And then he goes and does Wolfman, and it sucks. It's not terrible. It's very atmospheric. And I appreciated that it kind of cuts right to the chase. Like, they're heading up to the farm that maybe is haunted by a werewolf, and you think they're going to get to the farm, they'll start packing up his dead dad's things, and then some spooky things will start to happen, and then a wolf will show up, like, halfway through. But they don't even make it to the farm. The werewolf jumps out in front of the car, and they crash, and it chases them back to the farm, and terrorizes them all night. I appreciated that, but it also meant that the drama didn't work. Like, it's supposed to be this tragic love story of this strained marriage, that, like, they're going up to this farm to try and fix their marital issues. But you never, because the wolf jumps into their lives so quickly, you never really get a chance to get to know them as a couple. And Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, I love as actors. I love him in Catch-22 and Girls and On the Count of Three and Poor Things. And he's a fantastic actor. He's been in so many great things. Black Bear, It Comes at Night. And she's amazing. I loved her as Ruth Langmore in Ozark. She stole the show in that. And I was excited to see them both together in a horror film. And they just have zero chemistry. They, you know, you don't even understand, how did these two get together? It's like, I understand that you're emotionally distant from each other and you hate each other because you seem to, but how did this marriage even happen in the first place? How did you even get together? You look like you'd rather be anywhere else than with each other. And, you know, it tries to blend the werewolf thing with this idea of generational trauma, because his dad was obsessed with hunting a werewolf. And this is a spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler, because you can see the twist coming a mile away. That the werewolf is his dad, who's been declared dead, and now he's infected him with the werewolf thing, and now he's coming after his kid. And it's, you know, but it just, unlike the invisibility thing with the trauma of abuse, where they mesh together so perfectly, the werewolf thing and the trauma and the generational trauma thing don't work. It just feels like, okay, here's a horror thing and here's a social thing, and let's round together. And it also doesn't hold, like, they spell out the themes in dialogue, where, like, he'll say to his daughter, like, oh, I'm sorry I yelled at you, because my dad would yell at me, and I don't want to be that kind of dad to you, but I yelled at you because he yelled at me, and I'm passing it on to you. And he literally says to her, like, sometimes daddies are trying so hard to protect their kids from getting scarred that they become the thing that scars them. And it's just so on the nose. And also, it's not true. You can just be a good dad. It is possible to just be a good dad. You don't have to always hurt your kids. Being protective of your kid doesn't mean you will inevitably hurt them. So it just didn't work, and the werewolf design was shit, but that's been talked about a lot. But the guy, you know, he just looks like a hairy man. He barely has any fur. It just didn't look good, especially compared to, like, some of the great werewolf designs, like American Werewolf in London. And, you know, American Werewolf in London is a parody of werewolf movies, but it works better as a tragedy, as a romantic tragedy, than Wolfman and what Wolfman's trying to be. It's just pretty shit across the board. I don't recommend it. Especially on the heels of Nosferatu, which is this incredibly fresh and beautifully cinematic and dramatic and, you know, thematically rich interpretation of classic horror lore. And then Wolfman comes along and is so not any of those things. Yeah, it wasn't very good. A complete unknown. This I absolutely adored. This was, I'm a big Bob Dylan, well, I say I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, but my dad is such a huge obsessive, you know, basically a Bob Dylan groupie, that it makes me look like a casual Dylan fan. But we both love Dylan. We actually went to see him live a couple of months ago in Liverpool, and we enjoyed it, but he's exactly like how they portray him in the film, where he doesn't want to play the hits, and he doesn't even want to play the songs he's playing the way you know them, so you can't sing along. But there's like the bit in the film where he's touring with Joan Baez and the crowd are shouting out, you know, blow it in the wind, and he's like, it ain't a request type concert, man. It ain't that type of show, man. That's what he's like. He doesn't want to play the songs you want to hear him play. But we both enjoyed the concert. He was great, and it was just great to see. It basically was just watching Bob Dylan and his friends have a jam session, which was great. But yeah, as fans, we were both looking forward to the new biopic, and but you know, cautiously optimistic, because biopics tend to be shite. But this one was great. We both loved it, and my sister loved it as well. She's not even a huge Dylan fan, but we all loved the film, and Timothée Chalamet was fantastic as Dylan. He really like embodies the man, the myth, the legend, you know, and like he gets the voice exactly right, and the aura, you know, the mystique. And Monica Barbaro was fantastic as Joan Baez, and actually, you know, I don't love Joan Baez, but I liked her portrayal of Joan Baez more than I liked Joan Baez. And Edward Norton was great as Pete Seeger, where he starts off as Dylan's like mentor and father figure and his savior almost, because he's the one who like, you know, takes a chance on him and gives him a spotlight and puts him in a show and, you know, basically launches his career. And then gradually over time, he just becomes this annoying, boring guy who shows up. Like every time Dylan sees him, he's like, oh, this guy. And Ed Norton played into that beautifully, and I'm so glad to see all of them get Oscar nominations, because they were all fantastic, all completely deserving of it. And Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash, I absolutely loved. He was hilarious in it, as like the drunken, off the deep end Johnny Cash. I felt like, I mean, maybe it's easier to give like a scene-stealing performance in a small role than when you have to carry the movie on your shoulders. But I feel like he was a more convincing Johnny Cash and a more enjoyable Johnny Cash than I thought Joaquin Phoenix was in Walk the Line, because Joaquin played Johnny as very, very brooding and intense, as is his style, Joaquin's style, I mean. But Boyd Holbrook played him more like funny, and I don't know, I like that more. But yeah, I just love the film. I mean, normally I don't like biopics because they normally try and cover the person's whole life or capture their entire essence, their entire being in one film. Whereas this is very specifically, it starts off as Dylan arrives in New York and starts on the folk scene and carries up to when he starts playing an electric guitar, and everyone in the folk scene feels betrayed by him, but he wants to evolve as an artist, and he doesn't want to be boxed in by what they think he should be. And that was just a very interesting, emotional, dramatic crux. But it's felt like an antidote to formulaic biopics like Elvis and Bohemian Rhapsody, because it really is just long, extended sequences where you're hanging out with Dylan. You know, there's like a scene where he shows up to Pete Seeger's show and he's having a jam on camera, and it just feels like you're spending time with him. And the fact that all the music was performed in camera made all the difference, you know, when it's added in post, like in Elvis, like in Bohemian Rhapsody, or those kinds of films. You know, it doesn't feel as real. Whereas when Dylan gets up on stage in a nightclub and starts playing, and it's actually Timothée Chalamet singing into a microphone and playing a guitar, and the camera just slowly pushes in as he performs a song. You know, it feels more like a concert film than a traditional biopic. And that was the best era of Dylan music, as far as I'm concerned. So that was, it was just great across the board. I have no notes. I thought it was great. I loved it. And there's another one. The year literally just started, but this might pop up on the top 10. I absolutely adored it. Bob's Burgers season 15. This new season of Bob's has been on, and I've been really enjoying it. There's like, you know, really funny stuff, but also like some harder hitting dramatic stuff. You know, they actually until now Marshmallow had been voiced by like a white guy, but they actually got a transgender woman of color to voice her in this episode, where they have an open mic night at Bob's and she comes and plays a song, and it's really beautiful. And there's one where Tina and Louise have a falling out and they gradually kind of like make up, and that was really beautiful. And you know, it's crazy to think, like in season 15, Bob's Burgers is still in its stride, or whatever you'd call it. Like it hit its stride in about season 2 or 3, and it's still in it in season 15. American Dad season 21. American Dad's back again of season 21. It's crazy. And it's crazy to think that's still funny. That's still really good. And they can still come up with really interesting premises of stories of what to do with these characters. Like there was one where in a car crash, Roger and Stan get merged, and they hate each other. They can't stand being around each other, and now they are part of each other. And I don't know, so much fun. And I love American. I think American Dad's better than Family Guy. It's like it started off as Family Guy's lesser cousin, but it's become so much more creative and so much darker and funnier. And I think it's the better show of the two. The Inbetweeners. On my mum's birthday, we went to a restaurant and went back to their house for dessert, and she put on The Inbetweeners like from the beginning. and we watched a couple of episodes, and then when I went home, I was back into it, so I just continued where we left off and ended up watching the whole rest of the show. And it's so good. Like, most teen shows like Euphoria or Skins don't really reflect what being a teenager is like. But in the Inbetweeners, it's so realistic. It's so realistic to the mundanity of it and the crassness and just how disgusting teenage boys can be. And but the beauty of it is like there's all these horrifically cringeworthy situations that are so funny and so twisted, and the characters can be so mean to each other and so brutally honest. But there's also an underlying sweetness and vulnerability. Like when Jay is dumped by his girlfriend and he's crying, and like his friends are there for him to cheer him up, and it is like weirdly beautiful, even though it's such a dark, twisted show. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. I've had this on DVD probably for about 5 years now, and never got around to watching it. But since I watched The Complete Unknown, I've been listening almost exclusively to Dylan. And the Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid soundtrack keeps coming up, and he wrote "Knocking on Heaven's Door," one of his most iconic songs for this film. And I love Sam Peckinpah, but just for some reason I never got around to watching the film. So I stuck it on. It's very interesting. It's like I was expecting Dylan to be in it more because he's like third billed lead, but he doesn't show up till like 45 minutes in, and he's in like 3 scenes as Alias. He was great in the scenes he was in. It actually gave me a deeper appreciation. I already thought Chalamet was great as Dylan, but I thought maybe he was exaggerating the voice a little bit. It's probably been a long time since I heard Bob Dylan just speak. But then you hear him speak in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, and you're like, oh no, he does sound like that. He completely nailed it. But it's an interesting story. It's like James Coburn, I think it is Pat Garrett, the sheriff who's sent to kill the outlaw Billy the Kid, played by Chris Christopherson. And so it's this interesting Western cat and mouse chase, but there's the underlying emotional thing that they were childhood friends. And like, yes, he's a notorious outlaw, and yes, I'm a lawman, I need to kill him, but I love him. We grew up together. And it was very somber, you think of Sam Peckinpah, you think of The Wild Bunch, and it's very violent, gruesome, operatic violence. But this one was a bit more somber and sobering, and still very violent, but the violence isn't fun. It's very, very bleak. But it was a great film. The Apartment. I hadn't seen The Apartment in a few years, so I'd stick it on. And it's absolutely great. I mean, Jack Lemmon is like one of the ultimate sort of everyman actors. And Shirley MacLaine is so funny and so witty and well matched with him as the female lead. And, and Billy Wilder's such a great director that he can make this rom-com where a suicide attempt is a major plot point right in the middle, and recovering from the suicide attempt is like the whole rest of the film. But it's still fun, it's still lighthearted and gets a lot of laughs and makes you smile and warms your heart. That's the mark of an incredible filmmaker. Blink Twice, this movie with Channing Tatum's like a cult leader, like a tech bro cult leader with his own island, and he brings these women to the island and seemingly they're having a good time, but there's this sinister undertone that maybe something's going on. And it's directed by Zoe Kravitz. I thought it was a very interesting premise, and I was very intrigued by the story. But ultimately, I didn't love it. I didn't think it was great. It was, tonally, it's all over the place, because there's times where it feels like a parody of itself, where it's going for these really broad laughs. And there are also, like, really graphic, brutal, horrific rape scenes. And it's like, pick a lane. You can't do both of those things. And I thought that the twist, this is kind of spoilery territory, but it's supposed to be this, like, thriller metaphor for the abuse of power and men trying to control women's bodies and things. But it ends up not being that much of a metaphor, because it uses a date rape drug as a metaphor for a date rape drug. It's like just it's like a perfume laced with a date rape drug as opposed to a drink, I did think the editing, where the women are starting to have like flashes of memories of these horrific things that are happening and the memories that have been erased. I thought that was really interesting, how they would cut between, like, they're all sitting around the dinner table having a good time, but then they'll have a flash of something awful that happened the night before, something horrifically violent that happened the night before. And then back to the dinner table and supposed to be having a good time. It's like, what the hell was that? So props to the editor. And, I had a great soundtrack. I thought Zoe Kravitz picked some really great songs for the soundtrack. And it was an amazing cast. I feel like every single iconic actor she reached out to was like, sure, I'll be in it. Like, Gina Davis is in it, and Christian Slater, and Haley Joel Osment, and Kyle MacLachlan, Alia Shawkat, Simon Rex from Red Rocket, Adria Arjona from Hitman. But the script just, wasn't really deserving of those great actors, and the final twist is like one of those classic sends the wrong message kind of twists, where it's he drugged her and manipulated her and controlled her, and now she's drugging him and manipulating him and controlling him, and it's like, well, don't just become as bad as him. That's not a girl boss win. That's just wrong. So I don't know. I feel like it didn't quite land. The Wolfman. There's the original one from 1941. Because I kind of realized I'd never seen that one, or if I had, it was a long, long time ago. And I needed to see a good werewolf film after this crappy reboot. I really enjoyed this one. I mean, it's it's a nice zippy 70 minutes long or something. A lot of those old Universal monster films are really short. Like Dracula is like 70 minutes long, the Bela Lugosi one. And this, I love the visuals of like the fog rolling over the hills and the forest, and the transformation sequence doesn't look that great because they couldn't actually have hair growing, so they just have like Lon Chaney's feet and then dissolve to his feet with a bit of hair on them, and then dissolve to his feet with a bit more hair on them, and But that was probably groundbreaking at the time. It was, it's like 80 years ago. And Lon Chaney Jr. I thought was great in it. Claude Rains as his dad, and Bela Lugosi's in this as well as like the gypsy fortune teller. And it was interesting to see, like, I thought the new Wolfman, because they changed the character's name, it's not Larry Talbot anymore. I just assumed it was like a radically new story, but there's a lot of the same elements, like the wolf gets his foot stuck in a bear trap, and the whole thing of the estranged relationship of father and son, and that it's a tragic love story between him and the woman, and so all the bare essential elements are there. The main difference is that the reboot isn't very good, and the original is a classic. The Simpsons Movie. Stuck this on the other day, which I think it's great. I mean, I've seen it a gajillion times because at my school, whenever it was raining so badly that you couldn't go outside for lunchtime and you had to sit in the assembly hall, this was the only DVD they had at the whole school, as if all the PG-rated films don't exist. So they would just play The Simpsons Movie every single time you had to stay in at lunchtime, this is England. There's a fuckload of rain. It happened all the time. But it never gets old. I think it's a great film. It's kind of the problem that most TV films based on TV shows make is just making it a big bloated episode. And The Simpsons Movie is more, what if we weren't confined to 21 minutes, Because in a typical episode, something will happen, there'll be some strain on Homer and Marge's relationship, but by the end, Marge has to take Homer back and they reconcile and everything's back to normal. Whereas this is like, we have 80 minutes. What if Homer fucks up so badly that Marge doesn't take him back, she actually leaves him, and he has to do something really heroic to win her back? And it's just jam-packed with jokes. Like, they assembled an all-star writing team to do the film of just all the best Simpsons writers, and it kind of just harked back to like how great the early seasons were and how jam-packed with jokes they were, and what a high quotient of laughs they had, and it's emotional. Julie Kavanaugh's performance as Marge in this is absolutely fantastic, especially when she's taped over the wedding video to say she's leaving Homer, and her voice is kind of breaking because she's so sad, and it hits deep down, It's a great film if they ever get around to doing the sequel, which they keep saying they will, but it's been like almost 20 years now. It's got a lot to live up to. Ghost in the Shell. I wrote an article the other day about how shitty the Scarlett Johansson whitewashed live-action remake of Ghost in the Shell was. And writing it reminded me how much I love the original, which I've not seen in a couple of years. So I rewatched it, and it's just stunning, visually stunning, and a really fascinating sci-fi story about like the themes of like self and identity, and it basically, like, The Matrix is basically a live-action Ghost in the Shell. It's got specific things like the wires plug into the back of their heads, and the digital rain, the green code on a black screen, and things like that. But it's just more broadly the idea of like a dystopian future world governed by technology, and the mix of like explosive sci-fi action spectacle with like these really interesting philosophical existentialist themes. It's a fantastic movie. I mean, the live-action remake never stood a chance anyway, because the original is a masterpiece. But the original even has like more interesting lighting choices than the remake, and the remake had actual lights, like electric lights. In the anime, it's just shading, but it's much more cinematic lighting than the fucking remake. So yeah, there you have everything I watched in January. And what have you all been watching this month? Let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations or shitty films to steer clear of, like Wolfman or Knock at the Cabin. And I will speak to you at the end of February. February. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.